Hi, welcome to Minutes with Mickey. A time for us to wonder about the story of Naaman and his healing that we find in 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14. We're only talking about the first part of this story because the Gehazi story is the second half, and so we'll get into that in the next one. But I found that as I was reading this and I went back into the text and read several times, I found that I started asking myself this question: how many times do we get things wrong? That was the sort of the theme that kept coming to me as I was listening to this and reading to this story. How many times do we get it wrong? Now, you may be curious as why I'm wondering that, and here's why. The very first part of the story, why is it that God is giving victory to a Syrian king, to the army of Aram, who's in the middle of Syria? It says that God was giving Aram victory through Naaman. And how many times do we get it wrong that we think only God's chosen have to be of a certain kind of status? And really, here we have it wasn't of Israel and it wasn't Judah that was being used by God and getting victories. God was giving Aram victories through Naaman. So isn't that interesting? Then we have these young girls who are being carried back from Israel as slaves. And I find it really interesting. How is it that this young girl knew about Elisha? Unless, of course, her parents had told her that his reputation was so huge. And why is it that here she is a slave, that she would want her mistress's husband to be healed? You'd think that if she was a slave taken away from her family and being kept in this whole new place, that she would want horrible things to happen to the people that are keeping her a slave. So, gosh, that's very different, isn't it? So I wondered about that. Why is it that she cared? What about her upbringing and what about her relationship with God? And so the next part is that Naaman goes and asks the king permission to go up to Israel, and the king gives him all these wonderful things to take, and they go to the king of Israel when clearly the young girl of Naaman's household had said, "Go to the prophet who's in Israel." So Naaman gets it wrong. He goes to the king. The king equates leprosy, curing leprosy, with actually raising the dead. How wrong is that? I mean, he could have said, "Oh, well, we have medicine people, they'll take care of this," and he could have said, "This is something that only a prophet can do." But no, the king of Israel gets it wrong too. He thinks it's all his responsibility and that now Aram is going to want to fight a war with them, and he just gets beside himself. So Elisha hears this and has to say, "No, wait a minute, just send him to me." And then Naaman goes and sees the prophet. And yet he's expecting that the prophet is going to do some great big miraculous thing and big show of power and maybe even bow down and say how wonderful it is that this great man Naaman should come to him. So Naaman's getting it wrong too, isn't he? And yet Elisha just sends out his servant Gehazi and says, "Tell him to wash in the river Jordan 7 times." Well, Naaman is furious with that idea because we know that the Jordan River is really very dirty, and who would want to go into that stinky river? So he gets it wrong there too. It's his servants that get it right and say, "Look, if he had asked you to do something huge, you would do it. So just do something small. Just this. Go ahead if you really want to be healed." And then he did. There's more to this story, and there's more to the idea of who gets it right and who gets it wrong. But it made me wonder, how many times in my life am I thinking that I know exactly what I'm supposed to do? Someone tells me to do A, and I go and do B. Instead of going to the prophet in Israel, he goes to the king in Israel. And instead of the king of Israel sending him to the prophet, the king of Israel takes it all on as big responsibility and makes a big deal out of it when it doesn't need to. How many times has that happened in my life? How about you? What does this story make you wonder about? Have a great week.